Ladies and gentlemen, at the moment we are seeing ANC politics play out in real time. So let's actually get into the first news story. But before we do, can I please yet again remind you, please subscribe to the channel, and if you really want to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. And for those of you who don't know what buy me a coffee is, it's a donation page. You can go on there, pledge a coffee to me, and that'll be great. Just an announcement just before we carry on with the video. Terribly sorry for no videos last week. I'm trying to buy my business partner out in London, and it's currently causing a lot of problems in terms of negotiations. So terribly sorry, but I'll try to resume videos to the best of my ability. So let's get on to it. What are we actually going to talk about? Well, the first is actually the story about the Bela bill. And for those of you who don't recall, I did a video around the supposed settlement agreement that the DA Minister for Basic Education did with Solidarity, which basically says that we just won't implement the most contentious clauses of the Act 4 and 5 until frameworks have been adopted, and those frameworks will basically say how those specific sections will actually be applied in totality. It's fairly obvious. In any case, the whole idea behind it was to say that by having these generic rules and a framework behind it, the application of the rules wouldn't be arbitrary. And considering the way that some politicians are rubbing their hands in glee, I'm looking at you, Panyeza Lesufi, you do have to wonder whether or not they are potentially looking at using these arbitrary rules in a form of retribution type manner. So what's been the outcome of this supposed agreement? Well, D-Day, the day that Ramaphosa said the negotiations around how these two clauses would be applied has come and gone. Actually came and went yesterday, on Sunday. And so one of the reasons for actually delaying this video was, well, to see how everything panned out. So let's actually go through it. How did the whole thing actually unfold? Well, initially, the DA Minister announced her agreement. This agreement was done through NEDLAC. So NEDLAC is a statutory process. It basically is a process that the departments have to engage with in order to avoid strike action. So the agreement was reached between NEDLAC, Solidarity, and the department. And Paul Mashatile came out and basically said, yeah, but the agreement wasn't agreed by the GNU clearinghouse and therefore doesn't have any legal standing. Presidency, and we're hearing a lot of that, these words, the presidency, which is basically the president's spokesperson, but not actually the president himself, came out and said, well, any agreements that was reached shouldn't have been reached, and the president distanced himself from it on the basis that it wasn't his agreement, and he didn't sign off on it. And now it would appear that insiders in the ANC are lobbying the president to fire said minister on the basis that she agreed an agreement with, racists, because that's all Solidarity can be, right? Racists, according to the insiders of the ANC. So she's agreed this racist agreement without the president's authority, basically undermining the president, and ergo she should be fired. Interesting way of framing this. And who's the person actually pushing this forward? Yeah, Panyeza Lesufi. And it would appear that he's been backed by, the South African Communist Party. The party that doesn't really like the GNU. And Solly's been very vocal about how he'll do anything in his power to basically collapse it. Possibly even spreading misinformation, because according to the Times Live, insiders of the ANC basically said that they were lobbying the president to fire her because she was incompetent and useless. And the first comment that I would make to this is, these morons seem to forget time and time again they didn't win the election. All the parties in the GNU, parties in themselves, they actually got some votes, and together those cobbled togetherness of parties created a government. But if they all left tomorrow, the ANC wouldn't have enough votes to form a government. And these morons seem to keep forgetting that time and time again, because all they then tend to do is enforce ANC policy and ideology onto their political partners. And that's not how it works, because these aren't factions of your party. They're political parties that have chosen to ally with you, but they're not aligned with you as in terms of who they are. They're not the SACP or COSATU. They're political parties in their own rights. But it would appear that the ANC just wants to ignore that. And you may say, is that all of the ANC? And from all of the murmurings, the answer to that would be no, because it would appear that it is a specific faction inside the ANC. Now, for those of you who have been watching our videos for a long time, you've heard us say the comments that there is no actual Ramaphosa RET faction, and that to a large degree Ramaphosa is as RET as they come. But there is a faction, a political faction, which is the communists versus the Ramaphosa faction. And the communists who are being aligned with the Soli and COSATU and Panyaza, possibly even Paul Mashatile from what some people are alleging, have a very specific faction that finds itself in opposition to Ramaphosa. And what they're attempting to do is to undermine the GNU, because they know full well that what effectively could occur is that if the GNU splits, they can do a vote in Parliament of a vote of no confidence for the president. The president could get kicked out of office, a vote of no confidence. Remember, he's effectively then served 2 terms, so he can't come back. That's it. Ramaphosa's done. He can lead the ANC, but he can't be president of the country. And it would appear that that seems to be the game plan. And from sources, Ramaphosa is attempting to go against it and try hold the line, because he can see that the GNU's had very positive effects economically to the country, because a lot of investors are like, great, fresh blood, and we're not going to see the same old ANC stooges recycled over and over again. And I say that because, hold that thought, we'll talk about it in a second. But John Steenhuisen came out on the weekend and said, Times Live appears to be pushing the narrative. And if you actually read Times Live a lot, they do seem to be pushing the narrative. So either they have access to somebody inside the ANC that nobody else has, or it would appear, and you could argue, that Times Live are attempting to instigate forms of regime change. And how they're attempting to do that is to sow forms of discord inside the ANC. You know, you should fire them. And John says, how can you fire a minister for doing a job? Because that's effectively what she's done. She's followed the process. She's required to do this. She's come to a settlement agreement. And now you want to fire her for that? Well, that's not how these things work. But very interestingly enough, last week, what we also saw, and if you've seen my videos on it, we did a video around the justice minister who had apparently accepted a loan for a coffee shop. And there's been a lot of pressure on the president to basically fire her for this loan. You know, the loan. Some people call it a bribe, which she accepted during her term as the mayor of Polokwane. But interestingly enough, Ramaphosa now has acted upon that and moved her out of the role of Justice Minister to Human Settlements, and then promoted somebody else to Justice Minister. Less than 24 hours later, there was a news article alleging that she'd been involved in corruption. See, and this is the problem with the ANC. They've just got no one else left. And a lot of people are asking the question, why has Ramaphosa not fired the Justice Minister? Why has he just moved her? They're all saying, oh, this shows you Ramaphosa's weak. You know, we've heard those arguments time and time again. But actually, I got a different spin to it. Ramaphosa is running out of allies. He needs the allies that he has. Because let's face it, in terms of ANC factionalism, he's losing ground. He needs his soldiers. He needs his lieutenants. And those lieutenants are all drying up. So he can't fire them. Because he knows that if he does, it's putting a lot of pressure on him and he's losing allies. Whilst I must say, in parallel, they also seem to be running a different renewal campaign whereby they're basically cleansing the party of all those that are basically in opposition to Ramaphosa's ideology. And this appears to be being promoted by Thabo Mbeki and Ramaphosa, who basically say that everybody else that isn't going on this renewal agenda is basically betraying the revolution. And I must say, whenever I hear these words, revolution, I do kind of shudder a little bit, because it makes me think that the ANC isn't serious about uplifting the majority of the people. What they're more serious about is following their ideology, which they inherited from the former Soviet Union, to the detriment of everybody. It's kind of like, well, that's their political beliefs. Who cares if they've been doing it for 30 years and the results have been disastrous? We'll do what all communists do. We'll keep coming harder, and eventually it will sort itself out. Anyway, that's just my views. You can let me know what you think in the comment section below. I do read all your comments, so feel free to hook me up in the comments. I don't reply to all of them, because there's a lot of them, but I do read all of them. Until tomorrow, bye.